Oh, Steve White, Trek Boy 89 for Steve Arts 89. Well, Akiva Goldsman stirred up some trouble. He went on stage at San Diego Comic Con saying, hey, we've still got all the sets. Just tell Paramount you want us to keep going and we'll just run right through the original Star Trek. And I want to call it Star Trek Year 1, which doesn't really make sense. But then the Star Trek guy came on and did a video, and he was talking about how there was a 10-year space between Discovery and the original Star Trek where they could do another 5-year mission. And I'm like, no. Discovery took place between like 2256 and 2258, and Strange New Worlds is in 2259. Kirk got command of the Enterprise was promoted in 2263, and he got command of the Enterprise in 2264. The original series started in 2265 with Where No Man's Gone Before, which was the first pilot made in 1965. And the show ran like concurrently with the times. So they jumped a year to acknowledge that. So there's a year between Where No Man's Gone Before and the Corbomite Night Maneuver. So we don't see the first year of the original Star Trek 5-year mission. And then that ran from 2266 to 2269, which basically covers the whole 5-year mission, although it doesn't finish off the last year. And that was good because it meant it went into syndication, open-ended, and the series ended and they just started the repeats up again. And that helped the original Star Trek to not have an ending, to not have a final episode. And basically all they've got to work with, if they stick to canon, which they claim to be a part of, they've only got 1 year between the original Star Trek's pilot, first episode Where No Man's Gone Before, and the Corbomite Night Maneuver to work with, which would explain why he's calling it Star Trek Year 1, because it's the first year of the mission and the only year they've got to work with now. And they could do that, considering they only do like 6 episodes, maybe 10 a season now. They could do 5 years of a show and have it set in the 1 year of the first year of the 5-year mission. They could do that. Or they would have to run over the original Star Trek and remake it, which a lot of fans are disgusted by, and rightly so. And they can't do that because the canon issues. Anyway, so they've written themselves into a hole. So yeah, the only thing they can do is they can either acknowledge this is a new universe, a different timeline, and then just redo Star Trek and say, well, this is, a different universe, different timeline, and we're just covering the same period the original series covered. Or they can use what left, space they've got left in that universe and just use that 1 year. So they've written themselves into a corner, and the only way out of it is to acknowledge that this is not the original Star Trek timeline. And we all know it isn't, because they've done Tomorrow, where they showed Romulan going back and changing Earth's past and moving the eugenics wars like 50 years into the future and moving Khan into the 21st century. So none of it really matters anyway, but they're still clinging on to this idea that, no, this is Prime, this is the same, because they seem to think that if they acknowledge it's an alternative universe, people will reject it. We've already rejected it, because we know better. And we didn't really reject the Kelvin timeline movies. We accepted they were a separate thing on their own, and we, just treated them as they were, as an adventure series of movies, not a sci-fi television series, which the original Star Trek was. So yeah, but so I wrote, because the Star Trek guy was talking about this, and he didn't make any sense because he didn't understand the timeline. And I wrote a comment, and I just laid out all the chronology so he'd understand. And then he did another video saying, they can't do this. There isn't a 10-year gap. There isn't a 5-year period where they can do another 5-year mission. There's only 1 year. So how are they going to do this without rolling over the original Star Trek, which I think would be horrible and fans don't want? So they can't do this. What are they doing? And I'm like, thanks for mentioning my name. I always mention his. But so maybe someone else wrote a comment after my comment that was the same. But I'm pretty sure he read my comment and realised, there isn't a 5-year period where they can do this. Without remaking the original Star Trek, they've only got 1 year to work with. So they either do year 1 where they focus on 1 year, or they rewrite everything, which makes no sense, although it already makes no sense, or they just acknowledge this is a different universe, and then they're free to do a 5-year mission, and they don't have to have the events of the motion picture. They could just do another 5-year mission after that if they want. They can do whatever they want because it's an alternative timeline. And that was the point of the Kelvin universe, and doing a TV series in sort of that universe was we can do everything we want. We can redo Star Trek, remake Star Trek, and not actually interfere with the original show, so people can have the original show, the original universe, the original canon, all that intact, consistent, aside from James R. Kirk and the odd little thing that they made that were genuine mistakes, and we can do our own thing. But then they wanted their cake and to eat it too. They wanted to say, this is original canon Star Trek, and a reboot we can do whatever we want with. And the two can't exist together. And only stupid people will believe that. So yeah, they've written themselves into a corner, and the great thing about that is the only way out of it is to acknowledge what they've done, that they've rebooted Star Trek, and then just be honest about it and say, yep, we want to reboot the original Star Trek with Kirk and Spock and everyone, and we're just going to do it. And once they say it's a reboot, the people will either accept that or not. And then they can just go on without this lying delusion and shuffling around and acting like it's canon when it's not, because nothing makes sense. The costumes don't make sense, the uniforms don't make sense, the ship designs, the ship sizes, events, none of it makes sense. But it does if it's alternative universe and alternative timeline. So just acknowledge that and you're free to do whatever